Welcome to the first episode of the Shell Report. I'm Ahmed Ghafir, your host, here with Ben Strober, Maryland alum, producer over on 106.7 The Fan, and host of Locked On Wizards podcast. Ben, appreciate you teaming up with me this fall, man.
Yeah, no problem. Really excited to have the opportunity to meet with you once a week here and give a report on our Terps.
Yeah,
Looking forward to
absolutely.
the year.
Dive into the 2025 season. Obviously, Maryland football with the offseason finally over, now days away from kicking off their 2025 season against Florida Atlantic, kicking off year 7 of Mike Locksley. It's blink of an eye, and now we're here in year 7, but get a chance to extend the nation's longest non-conference win streak this weekend with Florida Atlantic. Ben, what's one thing you're looking out for this Saturday?
How they integrate this really young offense, including the offensive line, and I'm hopeful that Malik Washington is the starting quarterback. I know we're kind of going through that bit again where it could be three different guys. If I had to bank on it, I think it would be Malik Washington. If not, Justin Martin, the transfer they picked up out of UCLA. But playing, an opponent that is not going to replicate the type of defense you're going to see later in the year. How do you ease these guys into it? You have a very new offensive line. You'll return 2 guys from the 2024 unit, and those guys will also need a lot of work that are coming back. They were people who mostly struggled in the 2024 season. So with that being said, how do you get them up to speed in some of these non-conference games? And how do you get Malik Washington, if he is indeed the starter, up to speed? You're going to have a running back room that's pretty youthful as well, so you'd like to see them establish a ground game early on against Florida Atlantic. But that's going to be the main thing for me, because ideally you don't want to put a new quarterback out there in front of an offensive line that doesn't have a whole lot of chemistry yet and this isn't used to playing at the college level altogether. So it's going to be interesting to see the way Pep Hamilton calls plays for this team. What does it look like? A lot of quick throws, maybe. Try to get some of your receivers some work early on. I know they're expecting a big year out of Manning. And then Octavian Smith, a guy who everyone thinks is going to have a really big year as well. So I wonder if they're going to utilize those guys in the screen game early on, try to establish a ground game, just to get everyone up to speed. I feel like against Florida Atlantic, that would be the right thing to do for this offense. But it'll all remain to be seen on Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that those are definitely great points. And you kind of touched on it, but I'm really interested to see the run game. I think, Maryland, at this point, the fans, every year since 2020, Maryland's finished top 3 in the Big Ten in passing yards. And again, obviously last year, there were some inconsistencies there. But you can expect that the passing attack will be able to have its success. And I think for Maryland, the biggest question has really been being able to establish that balance. And like you touched on, there's some inexperience in that running back room. Nolan Ray played under or around 30% of the snaps last year. DeJuan Williams was limited coming off of an ACL injury that he suffered at St. Francis. But there's a lot of optimism in that room, between those two. Eli Mason is a guy that Mike Locksley put on scholarship, one of 3 players. He's kind of carved out a role for himself in that short yardage, as well as a blocking running back, which is a big piece. And then, you have freshman Iverson Howard as well. So I think you do kind of have some pieces there, and it's a very complimentary room where I think they all can kind of shine. But again, for this offense to lean on either a younger inexperienced quarterback, and I'm with you. I'm expecting Malik Washington to be with that first team unit this Saturday. But even still, being able to establish the consistency on the ground has kind of been lacking for a couple of years now. So I think that this is kind of that first chance for Maryland to do that. It's been Pep Hamilton's DNA, is being able to establish the run. He's done so, whether at Stanford, whether at Michigan, and obviously, been able to show those traits in the NFL as well. But again, I think that's kind of the biggest new development of the offense that, frankly, I think that Maryland fans need to see in order to find sustained success and conference play this year.
Yeah, I think they're going to need to be a lot better offensively, especially they were last year, because I think defensively is going to be a big question mark with this team going forward. You do have a couple of nice returners that you bring back, like Daniel Wingate, Michael Harris, and then Jalen Husky. You expect those guys to lead your defense this year, but ultimately you're going to have a lot of inexperience. They really lacked a sustainable pass rush last year. I think the last 5 weeks of the season, they only had a sack and a half, if I'm not mistaken. So they really struggled to get after the quarterback, and ultimately that's going to make everyone behind you on your defense that much worse, including the secondary, which had its fair share of struggles last year as well, even early on before Big Ten play really ramped up. So with that being said, I feel like the offense is going to have to carry a lot of the weight this year. And to think about how important this year is for Mike Loxley in year number 7, there's a new athletic director in the building that doesn't have the ties and the allegiance to him that David Evans maybe did. So this is a really big year for Loxley and his program because they need to get back on track after what was a really unacceptable year to his standards of only winning one game in conference play. And now that the team is, full of mostly youth and he'll be relying on a lot of these young players, it's going to be really intriguing to see how he's able to get these guys up to speed as fast as possible because, yeah, the non-conference schedule is relatively weak with FAU, Northern Illinois, and then Towson as well. So you'd have to be 3-0 at least before you get to Wisconsin in week 4, which will always be a tough place to play no matter who's under center, if it's Billy Edwards Jr. at Wisconsin now. So it'll be a little interesting piece to see that there. But they're going to have to be a lot better to play well in Big Ten play. And I know you look at the schedule and say you don't have Ohio State or Penn State on the schedule this year, but for Maryland and where it's at as a program, you can't really look at it that way because Maryland is a very young team. You don't know what to expect from them yet. And they're going to have to find ways to improve and improve quickly, or it could be a long year if they're unable to get things up to speed by then.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. I think other side of the ball would say, you know, obviously there's inexperience, a lot of pieces that need to be moved together. But I think that's secondary. I think that was a real struggle for Maryland in 2024. Maryland went out this offseason, and it didn't take long until Dante Joyner, Jamari Glasgow really drew buzz as solidified themselves as upgrades at the top of the cornerback room. Kerm Humes, Braden Lee. Braden Lee was the guy that Loxley shouted out as a guy that's really developed. Had his season cut short last year due to injury, so he's coming in as a redshirt freshman, expected to be part of the rotation as well. True freshman Jaden Chips, he's a guy that another guy when you talk about integrating guys. I think that's a guy that you kind of need to figure out how that he looks. But through his first couple weeks on campus through practice and whatnot, he's really flashed, and it could be a big piece at the nickel there. So I think that this secondary really being able to come together, and I think that's a big point for this weekend really when we talk about the FAU matchup with Keaton Belkamp coming in, Conference USA Offensive Player of the Year last year. So I think for this secondary, for the consistent praise that they've been getting as an upgraded unit from a season ago, I think that this weekend is probably that first chance to really solidify themselves as that.
Absolutely, and they can rant and rave about the upgrades they made, but everything is about what actually happens on the football field. You got to see the real results for people to really buy into what you're seeing. Because on paper, yeah, they look like they do have an improved secondary for sure, but none of that will be really answered until they play through the non-conference games and then get themselves in position in Big Ten play. But even though it's non-conference and the opponents aren't quite up to speed to what they'll play later in the season, I think you can take away a lot of things from those games early on if the secondary truly has improved. Especially, I want to see them turn the ball over a little bit. If you can force some turnovers, win the turnover battle throughout non-conference play, which I do expect them to do, that'll give you some confidence going forward into Big Ten play. Because once you get there, you're going to really have to win yourself some extra possessions to have a chance in those games. If you're turning the ball over and not forcing any on the other end, Maryland would find itself in big trouble at that point. But throughout non-conference play, I think it's a good opportunity to try out some things. See you have maybe as the ball hawk of your defense. I know Husky was a guy that was very high up in the interception ranks last year, playing at corner now since he moved to safety. Will he still put up that same production in terms of intercepting the football? I think so. I think he looked a lot better when he moved to safety compared to corner last year. Now that you have the other upgrades that they brought in on the outside, I think everybody should just be that much better defensively. I just really hope their pass rush can show some consistency this year and get after it a little bit, because good pass rush usually equals good pass defense.
Yeah, exactly, and that's another key storyline that we're kind of looking at this weekend. Kind of how that defensive line looks. You lose your top 4 producers from a season ago, from a unit that frankly struggled, and especially you could even say through non-conference play as well. So the signs were kind of there early. Cam Rice, Ian Thomas, I think those two are kind of the anchors. Sidney Stewart expected to be a big piece in the trenches there. Dylan Fontes is a guy coming into his 3rd year in the program where he's expected to be elevated into a bigger role. Yeah, so obviously, like you said, a lot of new pieces, a lot of young pieces, but also a lot of exciting pieces that I think a lot of fans are definitely looking forward to. But we will switch to our catalyst for the game and our score prediction. But before we dive into our catalyst for the game, it is sponsored by Catalyst Hot Dog. The catalyst to the game is brought to you by Catalyst Hot Dog. Catalyst brought the Jersey Dog to the DMV, featuring premium dry-aged Black Angus all-beef hot dogs made in Maryland, served with homemade toppings including hot onions, relish, and their signature Texas chili sauce. And don't miss their original garlic knot dogs. Catalyst always offers vegan dogs as well as gluten-free buns because Catalyst has food for everyone. Find them in CQ Stadium in Section 14, in the Xfinity Center in Section 210. Tell the people a hot dog is a sandwich. So, Ben, I know that we kind of talked about, some of these key storylines and kind of talked about, just overview of really what we want to see out of Maryland. But I'm curious to see for this weekend's opener, what do you view as the catalyst of the game?
Catalyst of the game, I know I mentioned it just a couple minutes ago, but win the turnover battle because I feel like offensively you have probably a new, well, you're definitely having a new signal caller under center, just depending on if it's a true freshman or not, which would be a really big stepping stone for this program because they haven't had a true freshman start the season at quarterback since 2017
Yeah.
when I believe that was Kasim Hill that was the starting quarterback that year. But if Malik Washington is indeed under center, you might see some struggles early on. You might see the offensive line struggle a little bit to find some cohesiveness. I'm not sure what kind of ground game they're going to establish. So with that being said, I don't expect them to be great offensively in the first game just because it's going to be very new for everybody on that football field. It's going to be full 100% action against an opponent that's out there trying to kill you every single play, which is a bit different from what you're seeing in practice throughout camp in the summer. So you might see some inconsistency from everyone. I'm sure they're going to try to get Malik up to speed as best as possible if he is out there as a starter. But offensively, I don't expect them to be perfect, but I do think they'll be good enough. I think the defense will force a couple turnovers down in their other territory, which will help them out. So I got Maryland winning 27-13, which I believe has them just missing the cover by half a point. But ultimately, the defense will do a good enough job to make it a pretty comfortable, at least, win for Maryland.
Yeah, I think we're kind of in the same boat. I think the offense will kind of should see some ebbs and flows there, but that's understandable with the young quarterback there, really looking to find its footing. I think for me, I think I just touched on it, but I expect the offense to really be able to be able to do enough over a 60-minute stretch. But I really think the catalyst is the secondary. I think Jalen Husky is a guy that, like you said, he's a guy that has really drawn buzz this offseason as an NFL draft prospect. A chance for Maryland to extend their NFL drafted DBs to 5 seasons now, 5 consecutive seasons now. And then obviously, Dante Joyner, Jamari Glasker, both those guys are upgrades. I think this is really that chance for Maryland's secondary to kind of prove themselves as that upgraded unit, like they've kind of been viewed at all season. And I think that again, for probably the strength of this defense, I think being able to shut down Keen Camp and make take away some of those deep balls, I think will be big there. So I do have Maryland winning. I shifted a little bit, 34-17. That is a cover for right now in that 14. I think it's 14 or 14 and a half now, but the point spread. But I think Maryland will be able to do enough to pull out the win on Saturday.
Yeah, I think you bring up a lot of good points right there with the secondary. That's going to be the biggest thing defensively that they need to improve upon this year as well. So why not get it started early here against FAU?
Yeah, absolutely, and we're excited to check it out, see how this team does with the offseason officially complete. Saturday at noon, CQ Stadium, live on BTN. We are first episode, and stay tuned. We will dive into Northern Illinois preview next week.